Okay, Surya, you can start now.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anga, for the introduction. Yeah, my name's Surya. I'm currently a fifth-year medical student at Imperial. I've just finished my intercalation in pharmacology, and I also work with an organization that I created to increase outreach for medicine, increase awareness for students, and basically just help you guys along the way. So a little bit more about me. So I went to Adams Grammar School. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the West Midlands. That's where I'm located. So I went there from year 7 till sixth form. I took a gap year for a year, traveled around like Japan, Southeast Asia, and now I'm an Imperial medic. So I started in 2019. I'm going to graduate in 2025. So I've had my first 2 years, we do a lot of pre-medical biosciences. That's like biochemistry, understanding disease. Third year, this is a picture of me on third year. We were at a GP clinic. This is when we do a lot more placement. So we have like 1 term at GP, 1 term in a clinical medical setting like endocrinology or cardiology, and then 1 term observing surgeries, so like gastric surgeries and that kind of thing. That's the distribution. My 4th year I intercalated. If any of you guys have questions about intercalation, let me know. That's when you do a separate degree, add on to medicine, and you spend 1 more year. So my medical course is 6 years. Normally in the UK it's 5 years. And I've got 2 more weeks of summer, and I'm going to be starting my 5th year in the middle of July on obs and gynae, and that's a lot of clinical stuff. So a little bit more about me. I thought I'd put my academic stuff up there, but I also wanted to contrast it with my passions, because although like I think it's important to have good academics, I think it's really important to find out what you enjoy doing in life and spend a lot of time furthering your passions. Obviously, I do enjoy medicine, but I enjoy sports as well. I like football. I've been snowboarding a few times this year. I love traveling. I think that's pretty cool. I also like reading. I like teaching and like meditating as well. So the most important thing as well, one of the most important things I want to take from you guys is, whilst academics are important, I think it's really good to have a holistic approach to your life and really enjoy the things that you do. And throughout this talk, I guess I am going to be talking a lot to you guys, but we'll have a long opportunity at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to take some notes and we can discuss everything at the end. Yeah, so this is just a general session plan. So just to give you guys a picture of what we're going to go through. So we'll go through the application process. I'll try and give a few tips and tricks here and there. And this is basically the chronological order of what happens. I think personal statement and UCAT, depending on when you kind of get your first draft done, some people might have already done their UCAT. You can do their UCAT. You can do UCAT quite early in July and August. And obviously the personal statement deadline is in October. But this is just the order that I started getting my work done. And yeah, at the end, we'll have a lot of opportunity for you guys to ask any questions or anything that you're worried about, anything that you're not sure about, I'm happy to help with. So we'll start with the personal statement. For you guys in lower 6, I'm guessing you would have had a little taste of this by now. So I've put, you want to kind of start getting an idea of it from July, from this period, and the deadline is October 16th. And whilst 4,000 characters might seem like a lot, remember, it is just 1 page of A4, and over a month or 2, you can break down 1,000 words into manageable chunks. If you're even doing like 50 to 100 every other day, it'll only take you a week or 2 to write your statement, and then you can slowly start to refine it. I think there is a lot of inertia, and there's kind of like a perfectionism when you're like, when you're starting to write a personal statement, yeah, it can seem very daunting. I think sometimes having a system to break stuff down into steps can help. So sometimes you can take a step back and ask yourself, okay, what makes a good statement? And then we have to think about, what are we trying to convey to the examiner? What do we want to get across to the person reading our statement? I think one of the most important things and the fundamental building blocks of that is our statement needs to be quite fleshed out with the characteristics of a doctor. So for example, we know that doctors need to be good leaders, doctors need to be able to communicate well, doctors need to be very resilient. And then you want to think about, okay, how can I get it across in my statement that I have these characteristics and that I can succeed in this field? You also want your statement to be very compelling, which is why I think employing a show, don't tell approach is very important. For example, telling would be saying, I am a really good leader, I am great at this, I'm great at this, but it's very hard for somebody to believe that with only evidence. So if you can identify your strengths and think about which of these characteristics am I good at, and you might be able to think, okay, I think I have very good leadership skills because for my football team at school, I captain it. And then you can think about a personal experience where your leadership has kind of shined. and then you can bring that forward. So you could say, oh, we had a final against another school and it was really stressful, but I managed to keep the team together and we worked as a team and we won in the final. And that comes across to the person who's reading it as much more, okay, this person has experience being a leader and they're not just saying it, they're actually showing me that they can be a good leader. I think with work experience as well, obviously work experience constitutes a large part of the personal statement for medicine. I think the most important thing, again, is your reflections, because anybody can just say, I've done a week here, I've done a week here, I've done a week here. It's not really about the quantity of work that you're doing or how much the quantity of experience you've had. It's about what you show that you've learned from it. Because the reason why they want people to do work experience is because they want people to have insight into what being a medical student and a doctor is actually like, so that people are informed when they're coming to make this big decision for their career. So if you can talk about what you've seen on work experience, how it's shaped your views on medicine, how it's made you more passionate, how it's compelled you to go, maybe after seeing a clinic, you went back and you read some more books, you furthered your knowledge. And also talking about resilience, I think resilience is a key part of being a doctor. Being a doctor is a long journey. It takes a lot of years to be trained, especially to the consultant level. And in order to do that, there are going to be obstacles along the way. So being resilient isn't a necessary skill to have. And then a small point, but whilst it's still very important, is flow. So obviously, these examiners are reading a lot of statements. You want your personal statement to have that kind of flow. And we can talk about building up a bit of a structure, which I'll talk on the next slide. Because you want your statement to kind of build up a little story that you're trying to get across and then have a conclusion that leaves like a lasting message on the reader. So yeah, like I said, there's an inertia to start. I sometimes think it can literally be good just to brainstorm, maybe think, if you just have like a big sheet of A4 or maybe even on your phone when you're just not doing anything, think, okay, what are things that I'm good at? What are the experiences that I've had that I want to introduce into my statement? What have my leadership roles been? What are my extracurricular activities? Because if you have a big list of anything, when you're trying to write it, if you get stuck, you can look at your list and think, okay, what makes sense to include here? How can I've just talked about leadership, how can I build up on this with another point about communication? Or how can I contrast this by also saying I'm a good listener? I think give yourself time. And I've put eureka moments here because if the deadline is October 16th and you start trying to write your statement at the start of October, you only have a week or two to think about maybe the last 2 years and reflect on it. If you start early, even if that's literally just making notes on your phone, you might start very early in July, and then a week later, you might literally just be having a shower and be like, oh, that time when I saw that surgery, I found that so cool, I really enjoyed it. But you need to give yourself time to remember these things and be able to reflect on them. And I think in order to start to deal with the inertia, I think it's important to slowly build up. So I'm going to talk about that on this slide. So like I said on the left, we can have a very easy brainstorm. This shouldn't be too taxing. It doesn't need to be stressful. It can just be fun. Sometimes you can just sit with your friends or family, because sometimes it can be very good to think about what other people's perspectives of your work are. You might not realize that you're a really good communicator, but your teacher might say, oh, wow, I've always been impressed by how you do your presentations. And getting that insight can let you get other anecdotes and experiences you want to talk about. And then I think employing a framework where you have a general structure where you might think, okay, first I'm going to talk about my passions, and then I'm going to build on this by talking about work experience and how this also furthered my passion. I'm going to tie this up with my extracurricular and the other skill sets that I can bring to medicine. And finally, I'm going to conclude emphasizing my passion and exactly why I want to be why I want to study medicine. And having this kind of framework firstly lets you get your ideas on the page. And also one day, if you're like, okay, it's going to be really tough to write the whole thing, how about today, I'm just going to write 50 words about my passion for medicine. And then over the summer, you can kind of relax a bit because it's not like you have to do full hours or full days of personal statement work. It can be as simple as half an hour every morning, and slowly you'll be able to refine it. You're able to go back in a previous paragraph, make a few changes, make something flow a little bit better. And that process will really allow you to fine tune like a great personal statement. And then hopefully by the end of it, you'll have your personal statement done. I think something to be aware of is everybody does their UCAT on different days, but if you guys are going to be doing the BMAT, which is another medical exam, it's going to be on October 18th. And I'll talk about that. It's just the issue is if the statement deadline is on the 16th and your BMAT is on the 18th, ideally throughout September, you're going to be wanting at least 4 to 6 weeks, ideally 6 weeks to prepare for the BMAT. And you kind of, especially in the weeks just before the BMAT, you don't want to be in a position where you're stressing out about your personal statement. So it's July now, you guys have got ages. Even if you just start brainstorming, making that framework, and slowly, even if you have a first draft, slowly refining it. So maybe when it comes to September, at that point, you're happy to send it to teachers, just make a few final changes, happy to send it out, because you don't want to be leaving it to the very last minute. So we'll talk a bit about the UCAT now. The UCAT is the medical exam that's the majority of the universities in the UK look at. You can basically sit it from next week up until September 28th. You want to find out what works for you in your summer break, and you also want to have a period of 6 to 8 weeks before, so you can prepare for it. This is a breakdown of the sections, and there are these 4 sections, and then the situational judgment section which is a little bit different, but we'll talk about them all in detail now. So the verbal reasoning section, I'm not too sure if you guys have had experience with the UCAT yet, but I've put these in not because I expect you to answer these questions, but just to familiarize yourself. So verbal reasoning, you'll generally have a stem, which is these a few paragraphs on the left side of the page. And then following that, you'll have 4 to 5 questions, basically asking you to make deductions from the passage. It's testing your ability to do comprehension, to understand the information presented to you, manage it in your head, and then at the end, in regards to statements, deciding if they're correct or false, or if you can't tell if they're true or false. It's testing your ability to read and scan keywords quickly. There's a lot of information, the ability to pick up the key pieces of information and make the key inferences. And yet understanding the relationships between statements. Sometimes stuff in the question might not be explicitly stated in the verbal reasoning, and they might expect you to read kind of in between the lines, and then finally make valid deductions. Following this, you have a section on decision making. This is testing more of the logical, analytical reasoning, looking at, so the example on the left is a syllogism where it might say, if A is B and B is C, is A C? That's kind of simplified version. And then you have to kind of think logically, does this make sense? You might also have some data interpretation questions on the right. There are 6 subtypes of questions, and each of them uses a different aspect of like lateral thinking, and basically just problem solving questions. The following section is quantitative reasoning. This is basically your mathematical section, but it isn't testing any conceptual mathematical knowledge. It will be testing like the highest the concepts will go is like ratios, percentages, very simple equations. It won't be testing any A-level knowledge. It'll basically just be testing GCSE knowledge. And so it's not so much about revising the maths, it's about developing your ability to do these skills very quickly, so to do small, quick calculations in your head, make estimations, and kind of do stuff simultaneously and compare if one answer is large in the other, or if one answer is smaller than the other. And it also testing your ability, specifically what I like to call numerical comprehension, because a lot of the time there will be a lot of numbers on the page. It's testing your ability to, because I think everyone would be able to do the multiplication and division, but not everybody can pick out which numbers you need to use in the calculations, and that's where a lot of people trip up. And then the final test-like section of the UCAT is the abstract reasoning. This is one, again, it's kind of hard to describe because it's one that you need to familiarize yourself with. It's basically just elements of pattern recognition, looking at the shapes and the relationships between them, and then basically from that you have to look at, so for example, in this one on the left, you'll have set A and set B, and then it'll show you some test shapes, and you have to decide which of these shapes belong in set A. And if I was just going to run you guys through this question, in set A, there are 3 shaded arrows, while in set B, there are only 2 shaded arrows. In set A, I hope you guys can see it clearly, but the shaded lines are vertical, and in set B, the shaded lines are horizontal. So if we're looking at which of the following shapes belongs in set A, we're looking for one that has 3, so an odd number of shaded arrows and also vertical lines. The only one that fits that is C. It might be a bit hard for you guys to see, but that's basically what they're testing. It's the ability to recognize these patterns and put other pieces of information into these patterns. And then following that, you have your situational judgment test. This is where you, kind of similar to verbal reasoning, you will get a stem, and then there will be some issues, some underlying issues. For example, in this one, we're talking about a medical student who's on a clinic with pregnant woman, and a patient needs to have a baby delivered, but there aren't any other experienced doctors, and she hasn't delivered any babies before. How is she going to respond to this situation? So there are a few issues at hand there. It's the ability to understand what's actually going on, what's important about the context, and how do we solve the situation, what's important when making decisions. I think for the skills tested, it's to do well in this subtest, you don't want to fixate too much on what you think is ideal. You want to be able to say, because ultimately we haven't had the experience that you will get with being a doctor when you're like 40. Obviously, when you're 17 and 18, it's very hard to imagine what exactly to do. So which is why it's very useful to refer back to the pillars of medical ethics. I don't know if you guys, you can always look at these, but the 4 pillars are autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. I don't know, maybe you guys have heard of them, but they basically talk about the general principles of how a doctor should act and how they should navigate situations. So if you're not too sure, sometimes leaning back on those can be helpful. And sometimes thinking about in real life, how would an ideal doctor act? What would the actual consequences of these actions be? And what would actually happen in practice? So for how to approach the UCAT, this is just a general timeline. Again, you guys should do something that's comfortable to you. I think for the first 1 to 2 weeks, you want to have like an 6 to 8 week period before your UCAT. For the first 1 to 2, I think familiarize yourself with the UCAT, whether that be books, whatever really floats your own boat. You should find that you're doing revision in a way that's engaging for you, because then it's sustainable to do over 8 weeks. If you're not enjoying it, try and enjoy it, but also it'll be difficult to do over 8 weeks. Sometimes people like watching YouTube. There are also day courses. I run day courses, basically, just going over all of the UCAT in a day, and also like all the small things you need to do to actually get a really high score. I literally ran one yesterday as well. And then for the next 6 to 8 weeks, this is exactly what I was saying to everyone I've spoken to. I think the most important thing for the UCAT is to practice. It's one of those things that everybody has the skills. Like, it's not testing any difficult math skills, it's not testing any difficult reading skills. It's just the ability to develop these skills and do them under a time pressure. The more practice you get, the more experience you'll have, the more comfortable you'll feel, and the more you'll be able to succeed in these question types. I think the most important thing, though, is to reflect, because anybody can just sit there and do 100 questions a day. But if somebody sits there, and even if they only do 20 questions a day, or they do something that works for them, if after every question they ask themselves, okay, why did I get this question wrong? How can I make sure I don't make this mistake in the future? That's a lot better than just mindlessly doing questions and not having that insight into your own problems. You need to have that insight into your mistakes to stop making the mistakes to see your score go up. I think for the final week, prepare for the day. And what I mean by this is you need to have a routine. For example, if your UCAT is at 10 a.m. in the morning, you don't want to have revised every single day over the last summer doing your revision at 6 to 10 p.m. because that's not representative of the actual experience you're going to have on the day. And the UCAT is a test where you really just want your brain to be in gear. So you want to kind of familiarize yourself to your brain to working in this time period. So especially if your UCAT's early in the morning, I'd say at least a week or two before, you should have a good sleep schedule and be practicing in the morning. You should be able to do a full 2-hour mock. The UCAT is around 2 hours. You want to be able to sit down at home or wherever you're studying and do a full 2-hour mock on your computer, because again, you want to have a similar environment. And also I'd say you want it to be stress-free. It's a different environment. You're not really sitting in a test hall surrounded by your friends. It's more like you're in a learning center now, and there might be someone next to you having a driving test. It can throw you off a little bit. So I think the more stress-free you are and the more confident you are, the better you'll be able to do on your day. And when it does get to your day, just remind yourself that you can just kind of relax, take a few deep breaths, and it's okay to make a few mistakes. Like I said in my general tips, it's not about getting every question right. If you start trying to get every question right, the way the UCAT works is the time pressure is very important. If you fixate on 1 or 2 questions, then you might realize there are a lot of easier questions afterwards and you've been stuck on a hard question. If you see a hard question, you should just flag it and move on, because there's no point. All the questions are kind of worth the same amount of marks. If you start your verbal reasoning and it's a huge chunk of text and it's a lot longer than it normally should be, it's better to just flag that and move on, because the next question might be a lot easier. And if you have the same amount of time, it's better to secure the marks on the easier questions than to try and get every single question right. I've put work before you can run, because the elephant in the room is that it is a very time pressured exam. But if you start revising from the first week thinking, okay, I only have 20 seconds to do every verbal reasoning question, you're not giving yourself the time that you need to develop the skills that will allow you in the final product to do it under a time pressure. You need to slowly build up those skills and then start worrying about time later. And I said another few general tips: get familiar with using a computer with a number pad. like a mouse, because these things will help you navigate the UCAT a little bit easier. There's small things, saving a few seconds every question will add up. Familiarizing yourself with the calculator and any binds on the keyboards that will help you navigate the pages quicker. For example, when we did it, you used to be able to press N instead of having to go to click the next button, and that can save you a lot of time. You don't have to move your hand around as much. So now we'll talk about the BMAT. And again, if you guys have any questions about the UCAT, I haven't actually seen the chat because I'm sharing, but we can always talk about them after. So for the BMAT, it's a bit more of a classical traditional exam. It's sat on paper, it's a 2-hour exam. It's a lot less time constrained. While timing is an issue, compared to the UCAT, is a lot less time constrained. This is a general rundown of the sections, which we'll go into a bit more detail if you guys just want to have a quick look. Okay, so we'll talk about section 1. This is what they call thinking skills. It's basically just an amalgamation of all of the UCAT, the first 4 sections of the UCAT. So for example, we can see on the left, we have some kind of like a verbal reasoning statement, making some conclusions based on reading comprehension. The middle one's kind of like a quantitative reasoning question, and the last one's kind of like an abstract analysis question. So if you've done the UCAT, you'll be pretty solid for the BMAT, and if not, what we talked about before, that process of doing questions, understanding why you got them wrong, and making sure you don't make these mistakes in the future is what's important. Then there is the scientific knowledge and application section. This section is basically testing your understanding of the fundamentals of GCSE biology, chemistry, maths, and physics, basically the sciences and math. It isn't testing any A-level knowledge. It should be stuff that you guys have covered at some point. And because of that, it's basically testing your ability to still have retained these concepts and the ability to put them into practice. So with the knowledge and application, this is something you can revise for a bit more traditionally. You can approach this in a way, obviously questions are great, but if you have a bit more time, you can, this image on the left is taken from the assumed knowledge guide, which you can find on the BMAT website. You can it's basically just like a specification. You can look through all of it. You can highlight in green what you find easy, and maybe everything in red you can highlight. And if it comes up, you can discuss with your friends or maybe with your teacher and be like, my knowledge of electric circuits is a bit fuzzy. Can you help me remember it a little bit? The good thing is that after doing questions, the gaps in your knowledge should come up anyway. If you're aware of your mistakes and building on them, hopefully that will naturally refine your knowledge as well. Something which I think is cool is this image on the right. I don't know if you guys have heard of Anki. It's spelled A-N-K-I. It's something that I think 90% of medical students know about, and it's something that you probably will encounter when you go to medical school. It's just that, well, when you have a lot of information to learn, flashcards have been scientifically proven to be very efficient because they involve active recall. And the more that, like, when you read a textbook, if you're just reading it, that tends to be very passive. And you might find that after reading the whole passage, you might not actually have taken anything in. But when you have a flashcard and it might say what was covered in this passage and you're forced to remember, it basically activates the neural networks in your brain and it solidifies them. So you form stronger memories. The more times you see a specific question, you have to ask yourself that question. I haven't actually looked at this BMAT. So what they have on Anki is called decks, and a deck is like a deck of flashcards. You can download pre-made decks. So other students might have made decks covering all of the knowledge in the BMAT. I haven't double checked them, but you could have a look at those resources. These weren't available when I was around, but it might be something that's cool for you guys to look into. The last section is the writing task. The BMAT covers a wide range of skills. Obviously here it's looking at more of your English and your literal, your ability in literature. So whilst it can seem difficult for people who have a very scientific mindset, I think it's very important just to pay attention to the subheadings. The way that the BMAT works is often there's just a cutoff mark. And in order to get that cutoff mark, you can just to pay attention to the subheading. So for example, if we look at this question, science and art once collaborated as equals, today it's science is too far advanced and they can't work together. It can seem like a very abstract concept, but if you look at the subheadings, it will give you a structure to follow. So it'll say, explain what you think is meant by this statement. You can put one paragraph to answer that. Argue that science and arts can still work together to better help the world. You could put one paragraph for that and maybe put some of your own personal evidence or anecdote. And finally, to what extent do you agree with the statement, and one paragraph for that. And it should probably be about a side of A4. And if you do it that way, because the way it works is the mark scheme is very structured in regards to the subheading structure. If you start going off on a tangent and you don't address the issues in the subheading, it's very hard for them to justify giving you good marks. But if you answer all the parts of the subheading, you can usually just get that baseline cutoff mark. So as long as you answer them to a level that's appropriate, I think you can be comfortable with this task. And yeah, it's a bit testing your ability to understand the statement that's presented to you, really understand what are the issues at hand, and then structure and express your own argument through your paragraphs, and then also weigh up the evidence that you've presented and come to a conclusion. So like I said, I've put bidirectional arrows here because I think you want to be, it'll be more fun for you guys as well if you do a bit of everything. You don't want to just do section 1, just do section 2. Again, like I said, you should make your revision engaging for all aspects of your life, even for your A-levels. Try and find something that works for you and that you think is efficient for you. Like I said, section 1, practice, identify your weaknesses, build on these mistakes, a lot of reflection. Section 2, you can get a head start by looking at some knowledge and kind of finding out your gaps and weaknesses and keeping on building on these. Section 3, run through questions, find something that's engaging for you, whether that be maybe you can pick a question with a few friends who are studying and have a little debate, because that will also help you open your mind to new perspectives. Even just like these discussions and debate, eventually you want to be at a stage where you can do a full essay, and then you want to be getting feedback on these. The general tips, don't fixate on your results too much. Like I said, a lot of universities are cut-off universities. For example, at Imperial, it's not about getting an amazing BMAT score, it's about being above the cut-off, and then you get to the next aspect of the selection process. But I'm not too sure, maybe other universities might expect you to do really good in your BMAT. So find out what your university wants from you. And like I said before, the deadline with the personal statements overlap. So it'd be good to either get your personal statement out of the way or have a heads up on the BMAT before, if you still feel like your personal statement is going to take time, start your BMAT earlier. And another small tip, at UCL, when I had my interview, they actually asked me, they present to you your BMAT question and they said, do you have any more thoughts? How come you wrote this paragraph? So sometimes after sitting your BMAT, it might be good just on your phone, if you can quickly write down the question and write down the general ideas of what you're talking about, just in case they come up. I'm not sure if they still do this, but they did do this for me a few years ago. Also, yeah, I didn't want this information to just be too like boring. You guys are students as well. I wanted to remind you that whilst academic stuff is important, I took a gap year. I had a lot of fun. If anyone is thinking about taking a gap year, I'd recommend it. You get a lot of opportunity because medicine is a long course. You're going to be studying for 6 years and then a few years after that. If you are somebody who, and there are a lot of people who just want to get like their head down and get on with their career, which is completely understandable. But if you are somebody who likes to travel or find out other opportunities in the world, this is the time where you get your independence and you can kind of explore those things. So this is just like Vietnam over here on the left. I did like a motorbiking thing in Vietnam where I rented, like I got a motorbike and went around North Vietnam. There's a bit over here on the right from Japan. Like there's a bit Cambodia and Laos. There's like a mix of places in here. But I just wanted to put this in because I didn't want this to be too information heavy for you guys. And I want you guys to know I'm happy to just have a chat, and I want this whole conversation to be fun as well. And again, so we'll talk about the last thing now, interviews. Again, chronologically, this is going to happen after, it tends to happen around November to mid-March. You can either have a panel interview, which generally is phased out. This is like the traditional interview. You'll be sitting at a table, there might be 3 people opposite you. They might be from surrounded like relevant medical professionals. You might have a nurse, a doctor, or a researcher, and they might ask you, okay, how come you want to study medicine? What can you bring to the table? What have your experiences in work been like? But these are generally phased out. The majority of universities use the multiple mini interview format. And to elaborate on this, it's basically just a circuit. Each one will be different for universities, around like 5 to 8 stations, basically just covering independent aspects of being a doctor. So it might be the skills that a doctor requires, understanding of the profession, your personal character, your work experience, an ethical dilemma, breaking bad news to a patient. I think with interviews, you don't want to fall into the trap of preparing too much because there aren't so much any real or wrong answers. I think for the like hands down questions that are most likely going to be asked, they might ask you like about your work experience, what did you learn, what are your leadership skills, or the most important one obviously is why do you want to study medicine, or like why do you want to come to this university. I don't think having a full answer is the best idea. I think having a few bullet points in your head about thinking, okay, I want to do medicine because I have a passion for science and I have a love for helping and caring for people. Just those few bullet points. So then on the day, you can kind of mix and match and kind of go with the flow. Because if you say something too outright that doesn't really fit in the context, it will come across. So what you say is important, but also how you say it is very important. If you find sometimes like interviews can be nervous, so I think you should put yourself in stressful situations, try and practice with teachers, practice with people you don't know, practice. We do have something as well I'm going to talk about. We have interviews, we do practice interviews where you'd get interviewed by an Imperial student that you don't know as well. I think doing these kind of things it's a good thing to get stressed out, because if you get stressed out when you're practicing, you'll be more confident on the day. And when I talk about how you say it being very important, I'm talking about body language, eye contact, just like a smile on your face, being engaging and chatty, like a bit of just like being very conversational. It doesn't want to be too much like an interview. You're going to be in there in a booth with one person and you'll be running around a circuit. So just having like bits of like little bit of conversations and chatting, whilst also explaining why you can be a good doctor. That bit about how you can just be quite conversational shows that you can be casual, you can build rapport in a team, you have good patient manner. These things come across as well, so it's not just the literal words that you say. So I wanted to tell you a bit about my experience and reflections. I think a growth mindset is really important. It can seem to you guys applying for medicine, there are a lot of obstacles in the way. I've got to do the UCAT, I've got to do the BMAT, and then I've got to worry about this. But I think thinking about it like that can be very tiring. Instead, if you realize, okay, I want to be a really good doctor, I have these that aren't really obstacles, but there's so much as opportunities for me to be like, okay, I can assess my weaknesses. How am I going to develop these skills? And these skills are going to benefit me in my career. They're going to make me a better doctor. Don't fixate too much on your results or your outcome. Like I said, I took a gap year. Anyone can take a gap year. You can always reapply. Just remember, if you're passionate about something and you really want to do it, you can always find a way. So just trust the process. Don't be too disheartened if anything goes wrong. No, it's always okay. If stuff does go wrong in your application process, or you mess up your interviews, you don't get any offers, the most important thing I can say is just do really well on your A levels. Just put everything else to the side, because if you do well on your A levels, you can take a gap year. And then if your A levels are there, you've already done the application process once. Realistically, the second time, you're going to have that experience. You're going to be a lot more comfortable in the interviews. You're going to be a lot more comfortable in the UCAT and the BMAT. You're much more likely to succeed if you have a good set of A levels, because then you've already done the last bit. You just need to do the application process again. And for you guys in lower six, after summer, it's going to be your last year. I'd really say don't stress, have a lot of fun. It's your last year of school in sixth form. And in order to not stress, I'd say start early. The earlier you start, the more like you'll be able to enjoy your summer. You know, everything's going to take care of itself. Manage your deadlines. So I'm going to say Parkinson's law, which is a law that work is going to expand the amount of time you allocate to it. For example, if everybody leaves now and thinks, okay, the personal statement deadline is October 16th, everyone in their head is like always going to like have more time, I have more time instead. And then it's just going to end up at the point where it's going to be like start of October and you'll be like, oh crap, like I need to start now. But instead, if you can think, okay, let me make a little mini deadline at the end of July. I'm just going to try and make a brainstorm, nothing too taxing. It shouldn't stress me out. Okay, by the end of August, I'm just going to have all my stuff in a framework, or like the middle of August, I want to have all my stuff in a framework. The last 2 weeks of August, I'm going to get everything down on paper. The first day back at school, I'm going to show it to my tutor. They can give it to me. I can finalize it, and bang, like 3 weeks before I'm done, I can focus on the BMAT. That will allow you to balance your work and really enjoy your last year of school. So yeah, I want to talk about a little bit about what I do as well. So we have something that I created called Ace My Med. It's basically to get you guys like a flying start into the medical school application process. And how it works is there's one-on-one tailored mentoring. So we'd put you in contact with an Imperial student and would kind of firstly have a consultation, which is obviously no commitment, where you just have a chat with somebody. We find out how we can help you. What do you guys want guidance with? Is it the UCAT? Is it the BMAT? Or is it just you want to have a chat about medicine, maybe get a bit more insight? And then maybe every week or every other week, whatever works for you guys, it should be stress-free. We kind of explore medicine, how your skills work, how you can build up your personal statement, fine-tuning your UCAT, basically just to give you guys a bit of confidence over the whole application process. On top of that, we do like masterclasses. So we just did a UCAT one where we cover everything in one day. If you guys are the kind of people who like to just get your head down, get everything done in one day, we try and make them quite fun and interactive. We have a lot of questions like on Menti and on your phone, because we know whilst there are a lot of resources out there, not all of them are by students for students, because we know it can just be boring, like saying listening. We want to make our stuff engaging for you guys, and we're always happy to listen to feedback. And as well, if personal statement is something on your mind, we do personal statement marking. We have some resources online where we have personal statements that were accepted for interview, like invited for interview in all the places they applied to. So like model personal statements. If you guys want to have a look at that, you can check out the website. Again, oh yeah, we have this one other thing. I don't know if any of you guys are in year 11 or if you have friends in year 11. We have something called the Get on Track Guidance Program, which is, we know that for people in lower six, you can kind of get blindsided in like this period of June or July when you realize how much needs to be done. And also you have to work on gaps that, or if I haven't done enough work experience, now I have to backtrack and fit in these last few months while I'm also stressing about these things, can be difficult. And we realized the decision just to do medicine can start as early as lower six. So if you're in that boat and you're really considering medicine, what we do is kind of a very, very low commitment, just 10 sessions throughout the year. And where we'll talk about what it is to be a doctor, how we can start building your work experience portfolio easily. You can ask us, how is medical school today? Really get insight into what life is as a medical student, figure out if it is the course for you. So we want to give you familiarity and confidence. So when it comes to these last few months, you're ready to get your head down and bang it out, and provide you with that insight, because I don't think it can be like you're committing your life to something. I think having the opportunity to talk to somebody, ask them, what did we actually do at medical school? What's actually like being on placement? What do we learn? And our goal is to help you prepare and develop the skills and confidence so that when the application process starts, ideally from the start of lower six, you've had these sessions dotted around the year, very low maintenance, but that progress throughout the whole year will give you the confidence that you need. And this is generally how our program would work. So we'd have a few months at the start of the year where it's flexible to your needs, no specific date, can be as simple as a phone call, just a conversation. So we might go over your goals, your career aspirations, how medicine works for you. Then in the middle months of the year, we'll start talking about the application process, finalizing your work experience portfolio, choosing the right medical school for you. And then specifically just before the application process, a heads up on every single aspect, getting you guys comfortable. And this would be for people in year 11 now who are going to start lower six, just a heads up throughout the whole year. And it's the idea of there's nothing to stress out about, because there's nothing to worry about, because you will be in contact with a medical student and we will ideally keep you guys on track. So I'm gonna just stop sharing in a second. I wanted to thank you guys for listening. I hope you find this stuff really useful. I'm gonna have a question and answer session now. We have an Instagram, which we just post general content on as well. And also, this is a QR code if you wanted to have a look at our website. So again, a good job for like listening to all of it. I know that there's a lot of information here. Even if you just take a few things out of it, that's something really good. And again, I'm happy to talk about any other questions. So I'll stop sharing. Yeah, if you guys want to put questions in the chat, or if you guys want to speak as well, we can have a conversation. So I have a question, which universities did I apply to? And may I know if you got all 4 offers? So I applied to Birmingham, UCL, King's and Imperial. So I took a gap year in my first year. In my first year I got into Birmingham, but because of my predicted grades, I think my school just were very, very strict. And then I knew I was going to get a good grade, so I just kind of left the application process because my school only predicted me 3 A's, so they kind of restricted my choices. And if some of you guys are in this boat as well, it can feel very unfair, especially when you know you're going to outperform it. And then I ended up getting 2 stars and an A. So then I just decided, okay, there's no point. I applied again. And then the ones I wanted to get into were King's, Imperial and UCL from those initial 4. I got into King's and Imperial. I had an interview at UCL. I think honestly I was just a bit flustered on the day and I didn't perform as well in my interview. And I do think this advice is for you guys as well. If anyone doesn't perform well in your interviews, don't take it personally. Like, they are very stressful, which is why I would just recommend preparing. So my ones were King's and Imperial, and then I picked Imperial. Yep, Mukund, you've raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Hi, Surya. So my question is, what would you say are the specialities of Imperial over other unis?
Yeah, so I think Imperial firstly has a very balanced course. So even in the first 2 years when we're learning a lot about biochemistry and like a lot of lecture-based stuff. They give us a lot of opportunity. Like I think within the first 2 months, we were already at a GP practice. There's lots of first-hand experience. They give you placements in first year, they give you placements in second year, all of third year is a lot of placement. So there's a good balance of academic teaching and also first-hand experience of the medical process. I think one of the main strengths is Imperial is a very research-based university. Imperial has a lot of research going on. You'll have a lot of opportunity to do research. I recently did in my pharmacology BSc a project which I'm going to get published, and there's a lot of options for publication. And if research is something that interests you, picking a research orientated university can be good. If not, you don't have to lean towards it, but it's always there as an option. And also I think Imperial have a very good feedback system. The faculty are very on board for any feedback that we give. They redo the course. The course was actually restructured a year before I joined because they started to reflect and realize there are better ways to do stuff. I think Imperial is very up to date with what the medical guidance is. I think Imperial was the 6th best university in the whole world and the best in London for medicine. So that's just not my ranking. Like that's what they were, because I think there's a lot of things which I might not be able to provide 100% insight on, but I think they are very good at what they do and they put a lot of effort into their work and they're very good with guidance. There's also a lot of welfare services. They're very good on mental health. They're very good on balanced lifestyle. But another important thing is sometimes at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. If you're not interested in research, it doesn't matter too much, or whatever medical school you go to, you guys should be proud. It's very difficult to get medicine anywhere in the UK. So don't worry too much. I'm sure like wherever you go, you'll end up having a fun time. If you love medicine, at the end of the 6 years, everyone will come out with the same degree. And if you are somebody who's really interested in research, even if you don't go to a research university, I think having the passion and looking for opportunities, speaking to consultants when you're on the ward, being very outgoing, it might be very difficult, but if you really keep going, I'm sure you can find somebody who wants to do research with you. So I think it's all about making the most of your opportunities as well. I think just some universities have different opportunities. Some might have more clinical opportunities, some might have more research opportunities.
Thanks, Surya. So sorry, just a few more questions. So for the FSMQ ad math, so how do you say it adds value for medicine? Like what benefits do you think it brings?
I guess it's just something that buffs out your UCAS. But I do think that realistically, if I didn't have that qualification, I don't think it would have affected my my university like application process. I guess it was just at that point. Can I ask what year are you in?
I'm in year 10 now.
Year 10 now. I guess. Well, firstly, you have to ask yourself, if I'm not going to do it, what else could I do? If there is something that you genuinely enjoy a lot more, or you think you're going to learn better skills for, I think from doing FSMQ, it's not so much that I don't think it directly influenced my application process, but I think it was like a part of the course that allowed me to push myself more in maths. Like I really love maths. I think the most important thing in school as well for all of you guys is you should enjoy the things you're doing. I think there's always this kind of like this work culture where you always have to work, get the best grades, and it's like it makes it seem like the outcome is more important. But I really do think the journey is more important. If you have topics that you're really passionate about and that you enjoy, you should follow them. I think for me, part of the reason why I did the FSMQ is because I enjoyed it and I love maths. But if you're someone that absolutely hates maths, then, and there's another alternative, maybe you could do another language, you could argue that's also relevant. But I do think the most important thing with GCSEs isn't worrying too much about these outskirt subjects. Is for the fundamentals like maths, chemistry, biology. I think some universities also look at English as well. You could look at the universities, they might have just cut-offs for those GCSEs. If you get above those cut-offs, it might say B grade or above or A grade and above in those three, and a total of 5 or 6 3A stars and the rest A's. Just like this isn't how it might be, I don't know, but just conforming to those guidelines are more important than thinking about specific subjects, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Surya. Sorry, just last one, I promise. So what are the recommended subjects for A levels, would you say, the strongest ones?
I did maths, biology, and chemistry. I think that's what like 80% of people do, because that's kind of like 90% of universities, basically every single university will accept those ones. Some of them might accept like biology, chemistry, physics, like interchangeably with math, but then some universities won't. So if you want the flat out, again, double check this for the universities you're interested in, because it doesn't matter. If all 4 universities that you're interested in don't mind physics and you like physics, you might as well go for it. But if you're not too sure and you just want to have that availability of options, I think maths, biology, and chemistry has always just been like the standard. If you want to do medicine, you do those 3, you don't have anything to worry about. You're not going to be in a position where, oh, I should have done this A level.
Yeah. Thanks, Surya.
Okay. There's a lot of questions in the chat. I'm going to go through everybody, so I don't want anyone to think I'm going to miss their questions. The first question was just about the Zoom link being shared by a friend. Any YouTube channel links, I will get to that at the end. If there are any YouTube channel links, I'll try and put them in the chat just at the end. The next question was the university question, which I answered. The next question was the, how do I do the one-on-one interview practice? Yeah, so I put our website up there for, it's called ACE, I'll put it in the chat. You can just have a look at that. Again, interviews will probably be happening around November to March. So I think people start to be preparing for interviews about, again, 4 to 6 weeks before the interviews. So you don't have to worry too much about interviews right now. But when it comes to those times, I do think looking at the opportunities and these resources, it can be helpful, especially if you want to put yourself in a more intense environment. And also, I think the one thing we wanted to offer in our organization is a lot of these organizations, it's very difficult to know like who's running them. But when you're speaking to an actual Imperial student, you can speak to someone who has had that firsthand experience. We've all been there. We've all had those anxieties. We've all had those difficulties. We've all faced the obstacles. So we want to offer you our insight as well. So if you want to check out our website, the QR code, someone asked about the QR code. That's just going to the website. So if you access the website, it's the same as using the QR code. The next question is asking about if we've lived in the UK for a few years regarding local students, international students. Again, I haven't looked into this exactly. I can talk about personal experience. I remember somebody discussing with me about being an international student. I think apparently if you've lived in the UK for more than 3 years, you'd be classified as a local student. But again, it might depend on your visa or on the basis of why you're staying here. There will be guidelines on that online. So I don't want to comment and give you 100% certainty, but I think I've heard for 3 years. I think maybe by next year, if you've stayed for 4 or 5 years, it should be okay. I hope that helps, but I would recommend you to double check.
Yeah, Surya, I think maybe avoid questions on those things, please, and keep it to only the medical school admission. Just say like they want, where do I get an accommodation in Oxford? Avoid those sort of questions, please. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Someone asked about what subjects did you do getting into medicine? I think I just touched on that, just repeating the main ones for GCSE. If you're in year 10, it's the biology, chemistry, maths, and that kind of like making sure you just get those the boundaries. And then for A levels, those ones. How many preparation, so August 10th is about 9 weeks from now. If someone hasn't started preparing yet for the UCAT, I'd think ideally, I think it depends on how confident you are, or how, maybe if you just do a practice test and you're in a good spot. Yeah, I think the best thing, the recommendation would to do is do a test, see how familiar you are, see what your score is like. And then after that, even if that only takes half an hour, you do a few questions, then you'll realize how much preparation you need. I personally would recommend, there's no harm in starting early. If you do 8 weeks, and even for the first 2 weeks, if it's very relaxed weeks, just like looking on YouTube, familiarizing yourself with the process, the first 2 weeks can be relaxed. So even the first week is relaxed, and then slowly start building up. You don't want to be in a situation where you say, okay, I'm going to do 4 weeks, and then it's very difficult to go on holiday for 4 weeks, come back, and then get into the mindset of revising for 5 hours a day. I think the process of building it up, even if you are going on holiday, just watching a video or reading a few books here and there. Someone asked about BMAT resources. Yeah, we do have one-on-one BMAT resources, and we will offer a masterclass closer to the date. If you are interested in that, if you want to give me if you put on the website, we can actually sign up now, and we'll give like a consultation where there's no commitment, and we can talk about how we can help you improve with your BMAT and also all aspects of the application process. And for masterclasses, we will update our website close to the date. And if you want to email me, you can email me on the website as well. Is it true if you're applying for medicine, you can't apply for dentistry? I can't comment on this, but I'm sure if you search that online, it would come up probably quite soon. how important is UCAS and its tariff points in the university application? I think the points system, I don't remember there being a point system for me. I think the point system was there before me. I'm not sure if it's still relevant. So I don't know if you had your information from someone recently about the point system. And extracurriculars, they're more about what you mentioned in your statement and what you've taken from them, the skills that you've built, than pure like a point system. I haven't heard of the point system. I think I know what you're talking about, but I think it was before me. I'm not sure if they've implemented it. Somebody said thank you. Of course, no problem. I'm happy to help you guys. Somebody asked, do you have any UCAT or BMAT mock tests? So like I said, we have the UCAT course. In the course, we do a lot of questions. So we want to build students' experience, give them a lot of familiarity. A lot of the course yesterday, so we spend a lot of time working through examples together. I think it's very important to understand the student's thought process and then maybe see where they're going off on a tangent. Or I think everybody has the knowledge to succeed in the UCAT and the BMAT. It's a lot of basic skills, but it's about not making small assumptions with questions, reading the questions properly and getting that practice in. That's what we try and build on the course. We have one on the 22nd of July and the 29th of July. If you guys are interested, you can sign on the website or on WhatsApp as well. You can message me. I'm in year 10 now. Should I start preparing for UCAT or BMAT? I've had this question before. I wouldn't recommend doing it so early. There are a lot more important things you should be doing in year 10. The UCAT and BMAT are exams you're going to sit at the end of year 11 and the start of lower 6. It'd be too difficult to start revising for them now. Even familiarizing yourself, honestly, you don't have to. And for people who are very young, the BMAT is only relevant for this year. If you're applying this year, you're going to do the BMAT. If you're applying next year, there is a lot of talk about removing the BMAT and replacing it. So you don't even have to worry about that. I think the UCAT has always been very standard and it likely will still be there. Like I said, I recommend about 8 weeks for the UCAT. Maybe if you want to have a look at some stuff, a bit of familiarization. But the thing is, when you're in year 10, you already have your GCSEs to worry about. They should be your priorities. And even in year 10 and 11, you're going to have your GCSEs. So don't worry about this application stuff. The most important thing, maybe through year 10 and 11, if you wanted to get a head start in the application process, is looking at work experience, looking at extracurriculars. Can you join a new club? Can you get involved a bit more in your football team? Those small things, but again, these should be things that you enjoy. You shouldn't do something for the sake of it because you won't enjoy it. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to answer. Uncle, a few people are asking just for the recording. Do you want to put the link in the chat or in the...
I can't put the, I mean, I'll put the YouTube, I don't know, I mean, I'm not very, if I can send it to you, the YouTube channel link, can you put it? Because I'm not very good in IT.
Yeah.
I'll send it to you now. Yeah. And also, Surya, talk about your thing where, like, you know, the 10 people intensive course you do. Can you talk about it as well? So that, please.
Yeah, of course. So we did a course yesterday. I think I was speaking to some of the students today. They found it very helpful. So we did a UCAT course. So like I explained about the UCAT. So at the start, we did every single section. We tackled it kind of from top to bottom. What we do is we first give a few questions to familiarize the student with what the section is going to cover. Then we explain the section. We explain the fundamental skills that are going to be needed to succeed in this section. And then we also talk about common mistakes that students make, how students can develop these skills in a practiced environment, and then also for the day. Then we'll do a lot of questions together where we want to interact with the students, we want the students to have fun. We'll give the students the opportunity to answer the questions. So we might have a verbal reasoning question and I might say, does one of you guys want to answer? We'll have a little discussion. We'll see why people are getting it right. We'll also be able to help people and why they're getting it wrong. And I think it's good for the students to be able to learn from each other and have that nice, relaxed environment where it's okay to make mistakes, because knowing that you've made these mistakes and you can reflect on them is the most important process, not just for medicine, but I think in life as well. If you're okay with making these mistakes and getting these questions wrong, you can develop this confidence. And then after each section, we'll have a practice test where we want to build this confidence independently, and students will have an interactive session where, continuing this, they'll be able to answer on the laptop, on the phone, and then afterwards we'll go through each of the questions in the practice test independently and talk about the small mistakes and how to improve them, and then tie up each section. We run through each section and kind of like a crash course, because we want to condense this information and make it efficient for you guys. And we're offering that. There's a session on the 22nd of July. You can access it on the website, or you can WhatsApp me. And there's a session on the 29th of July. And yeah, and I think if you guys did want any more information on that, feel free to contact me. Somebody asked when would be the right time to start the 10 session guidance. I'd say probably at the start of lower six, and then we could kind of slot it in once a month with the rest of not taking too much away from your studies, kind of complementing your studies, just kind of so you don't have too much information overload in the last few months. And you can kind of have that relaxed approach. And it's also stress-free, not just for the students, but for the parents, because all the information regarding what tests they're going to be, how they're going to do the statement and stuff, we can keep you up to date on that. Someone said, how useful is further maths for medicine? Are you talking about A-level further maths? Or are you talking about the FMSQ, if you can reply? Someone asked, how do we WhatsApp? I'll put my number in the chat. If anybody can't access the chat, Sudarshan uncle can forward you my number as well. Somebody asked about A-level further maths. Are you talking about, sorry, you're talking about, so just A-level, not AS. If you're talking about A-level, I guess it depends, because fundamentally, like we said, most people, if they're doing maths, they're going to be doing, most people, if they're going to be doing A-level further maths, you're also going to be doing A-level maths. At that point, if you're doing only 3 A-levels, you only have 1 space left for biology and chemistry. And you should look into the universities that you're interested in, but most universities would expect both biology and chemistry. So if you want to do A-level further maths, you might be in a situation where you're doing further maths, biology, chemistry, and normal maths. And then you need to ask yourself, if I'm still doing 4 A-levels, can I perform well and get good grades in all of them? Because you don't want to be at a point where, because you have so much going on, you compromise all of them. I think for universities like Oxford and Cambridge, they do appreciate students who put extra A-levels, have a bit more to buff out their UCAS and their statement. But for the majority of other universities, I think 3 A-levels is just the standard. If you do 3 A-levels, you'll have opportunity at 90% of universities. Even Oxford and Cambridge, you'll still have opportunities. It's just, if you're doing that 4th A-level, the only reason you would be doing it is if you're set on Oxford and Cambridge. For AS level, yeah, I started further maths for AS level, but then I did some research. I looked into the application process, and I saw that for Imperial and UCL and the top universities that I wanted to go to, there was no benefit of doing the AS level. Like, they didn't really care so much as to what grade you got on your AS level. They obviously, like, so I just said, like, I did a complicated thing, but I did well in my AS level results. So what you can do sometimes in maths is you can swap some modules out. So I did really well in my D1 and my S1, like in those modules, and then I just moved them to my maths. So I just didn't have to do as much work in A-level maths because I already had those grades from AS level, and then I focused on biology and chemistry. So I think you should look at, it's kind of a matter of efficiency. Anybody can do loads of stuff, but it is a bit, if you get a little bit of heads up about what the universities want, you might realize you don't need to put so many resources in one basket. But again, if some universities do want further maths, then you get that heads up and you say, okay, I'm going to take this a bit more seriously, and I'm going to put my head down for this year and work on it. I hope that makes sense.
Surya, I put the YouTube channel link on your WhatsApp. Can you pass it on to them, please? So you can put it in there. Yeah, in your WhatsApp phone. Yeah.
Yeah, will do.
Can I stop the recording now?
Yeah, that's okay.